Hello, hello. Thank you for joining us. Brian, Hubert, Jennifer. Hey, thanks for coming. Great to see you, Pablo. If you guys have joined us today, welcome. Please make sure to drop your name, your industry, your role, and where you're tuning in from so that we can get to know you. We're going to give it a little bit of time. Hi, Zach. Hi, Tara. While everybody's rolling in, let's just take care of a little bit of housekeeping. If you look at the bottom right-hand side of your chat, you'll see a blue box that says either host and panelists or everyone. If you could change that to everyone, that way you'll make sure to talk to the entire audience and panelists. We can all see your questions. That would be very helpful. We want to keep this as interactive as possible, so take advantage of being here live. Be sure to interact with the audience, drop questions in the chat, drop questions in the Q&A, interact with our panelists because they are big brains that you are going to want to really tap into. And feel free to drop in your LinkedIn profile. I mean, we want to make sure that our community stays a community, so we want to keep you guys connected as much as possible. Hey, Megan, how are you? Marino, nice to see you. Thanks for joining us. We're getting a lot of people jumping in. Montreal. Well, hello. Boise, Idaho. Hey, Jacob. Great to see you. Okay, and also, as you're going through this content, this is going to be a very packed webinar. As we're going through the content, be sure to use the Q&A section down at the bottom so that I can flag them to our panelists. If you drop them in the chat, that's fine too. I'll just make sure to move them over, but just to make sure that they're not missed, drop them in the chat section. Thank you so much for joining. Hey, ATL. And while we're just waiting for a few more people, I just want to make sure that you guys know that September 19th through 21st, Outreach is having a Women in Sales Summit. Venus Williams is our guest speaker. I don't think this is one you'll want to miss, so go to summit.outreach.io to learn more about it, but I think it's definitely one worth attending. If you guys want to continue the conversation, learn more from any of our contributors, Sarah or Taff, make sure you join our community, continue the conversation, listen to our Revenue Innovators podcast, where we're going to keep talking about things like this. But without any further ado, let's get into the good stuff. So we have Sarah Van Caster and Taff Love here. I'll let them do their own intros. And while they're doing their intros, you'll see a short poll pop up. But today we've got some battle-tested guests that are going to present to you key concepts on account segmentation and scoring that you can take away to apply to your unique company and business needs to make sure you're working the biggest and best deals possible. With that, I'll hand that over. I'll launch the poll, but I'll hand that over to Taft and Sarah.
Thanks, Marcella. Taft, I'll do a quick intro and then pass things over to you. It's great to be here and be joining the Sales Hacker community. And we have such a fun topic today, account segmentation and scoring. I don't think often gets the spotlight, so I'm really looking forward to digging into this today with Taft. I'm Sarah Van Caster. I lead the solution marketing efforts for our growth solutions at Varicent. I'm relatively new to Varicent, but I've been in the sales technology space my entire career in a variety of different roles. And in fact, it was probably about 100 years ago, but I think one of my first projects, I was thinking about this last night, one of my first jobs was actually building an account scoring model for a team at a large transportation company. And at the time we were building it into their homegrown CRM system in the mainframe. So it was a while ago. Since then, I've worked with many customers across different industries on all their sales planning efforts. And account scoring is often something that comes up. It's a complicated topic, and I'm glad and happy to be diving into it today. And Taft, I'll pass things over to you.
Thanks, Sarah. Hi everybody, I'm Taft Love. I have spent the last 3.5 years at a company called DocSend. About a year and a half ago, we were acquired by Dropbox, hence the Dropbox DocSend logo you see here. Um, I am here because at DocSend we did some pretty complex both lead and account scoring, and prior to that, I started an operations consultancy that helped a lot of companies do account scoring. And before that, I worked at Smart Recruiters, where we did enterprise selling and account scoring exercises there on a regular basis. So this is something that that's sort of near and dear to me. Something I've done a lot of times, and excited to share a little bit of that experience with the group.
Awesome. We're glad to have you here, Taft. And so before we dive into things, Marcella, should we take a quick look at the poll? We just wanted to capture everyone's industries for everyone tuned in today. And we're going to apply the most popular industry to our workshop as we dig in and evaluate some account scoring. So I can see it. Maybe I should move it. If I move this, can we all see the responses? Taft, can you see it? If you can,
I can't see. I can only see your deck, but I can see that 16% of our group came from "oh there."
That's us being fancy. Yes, that's the French spelling.
Well, the winning or the most represented industry that we have today is high tech. So we'll just capture that, and as we dig into the workshop, we'll just put on our high tech industry hats, and it'll certainly, there was definitely we had lots of industries represented. So just to have a little bit more of a concrete example as we talk through some scoring metrics, we'll take on the role of a high tech company, but we'll certainly talk through this concept as it applies across all industries. So thanks to everyone who responded, and I loved seeing where everyone was located as well. Okay, so let's dive in. Very straightforward agenda. I just want to start by level setting on some terminology. I feel like we often talk about these concepts, but use a lot of different words. So what do we mean by segmentation, scoring? Are we scoring leads? Are we talking about customers or opportunities? What are we scoring and why? So we'll draw all those boundaries so we're all on the same page for today's exercise. Then we'll dive in to the workshop with Taft. And as he mentioned, as a veteran in sales and sales operations, he's no stranger to evaluating segmentation and scoring efforts. And he's got some great stories and insights to share as we break all this down. But I do want us to be transparent up front. We're not providing an account scoring silver bullet today. So hopefully I don't see everyone hop out, but so you're not going to walk away with 100%. Okay, these are the 3 to 5 metrics that apply to me. What we want to do is provide you with a framework so you really can more thoughtfully approach your account scoring and how you evaluate your customers, and just give you some tools to really help improve those efforts. We'll also talk briefly about adding predictive intelligence to your scoring practices. Machine learning can provide some incredible access to customer data that you might not even know you don't know. So we'll talk a little bit about that. And Taft has some great experience and can talk to the value that can bring to the table. And then we'll just wrap things up by summarizing the framework and giving you some best practices to leave with. Okay, so I think it's always important to start with, why are we here? Why does account scoring matter? Account segmentation and scoring is a foundational step in your sales planning efforts. When it's done right, or done well, you can really optimally build territories that are filled with customers with a high propensity to buy. And you can assign quotas that are challenging but achievable because they're full of fruitful customers for your sellers. But if your salespeople are focused on the wrong accounts or wrong customers, or they don't know which products they should be focused on, things can start to unravel pretty quickly. So by improving your customer assessments and evaluations, we're talking about delivering real impact to your sales teams. Better meet the needs of your customers, win more, win bigger, expand, cross-sell. We all want those things. And getting your account scoring really honed in can really contribute to all of those things. So I think we're all on board for wanting to do more of that. But if we think about selling in the B2B space, you're rarely going to be selling to a single individual. And while lead scoring, which is done at that contact level, it definitely serves its purpose, but you really can optimize your seller's time by helping them understand which accounts they should be focused on. And I'm sure every ambitious sales leader at some point probably would have been willing to accept the challenge to sell to the whole world and take on a pipeline of, what are we at, about 8 billion people on the planet. And that's ambitious, but it's not realistic. The reality is every sales organization is limited by the same 3 constraints. And this is true regardless of industry, regardless of the maturity of your organization. We all face these challenges: people, money, and time. No one has an unlimited number of sellers. Your sales organization, although the numbers and roles might change over time, it's still finite. And it's not just expensive to pay salespeople, it's expensive to break into new markets. It's expensive to break into new industries or launch new products. And you need to weigh all of these decisions with their cost. And then lastly, time. We all need more time. I have a 4-year-old and a 1-year-old. I need more time every day. But sales leaders they're measured in weeks and months and at most quarters. And if they don't deliver within those time periods, they're out the door. So building an effective sales strategy is really required to navigate all of these constraints while delivering the revenue required by your business. And the foundation for every good go-to-market strategy begins with effectively segmenting the market, figuring out which customers you should focus on to really maximize your revenue potential. So Taff, keep me honest, can you agree that these are constraints we all face?
They are, and to add another layer of sort of importance here, this doesn't even take into account, and I think time, money, and people all sort of wrap into this, but the opportunity cost of spending time on the wrong things is more than just the cost of the people or the time, because the opportunity cost of SDRs doing manual tasks prior to the advent of outreach was giant, and outreach helped us understand the value that was going down the drain. And account scoring is very similar. Like every hour your highly paid AE spends on whom you expect a 3x return, every hour they spend working on an account that would have been scored out of their view is really 4 times the value you pay them in terms of opportunity costs. So giant cost to getting this wrong.
Bingo. Well said. Yes, absolutely. Opportunity costs can be huge and often hidden. So quick PSA for all of us. A hard truth is not every lead is a good deal. And Taff, this is exactly what you were just saying. And not every potential customer is someone we should be selling to. So the question becomes, how do we really know the difference? And that's where account segmentation and scoring really comes in. So as I mentioned up front, just to really draw some delineations around what we mean by these terms. So account segmentation, I'll start with, and then we'll switch over to scoring because they're complementary, and we're really going to focus our workshop on the scoring. But segmentation is the process of dividing your customers into groups based on specific characteristics. So it's based on mostly readily available, fairly objective data. So a quick internet search is often going to provide you with some of these characteristics that you can use to segment your accounts and put them into different buckets. So basic things like industry, where they're located, what their annual revenues look like. And this is definitely helpful, especially when you have a large pool of customers, but it's going to provide limited insights into buyer potential. It doesn't really evaluate how much time or effort, again, to Taff's point, that you should really put into closing the deal. And it doesn't really get into what the goals of your customer are. So for that, we need some more subjective measures that come with a little bit more nuance. And that's where we can bring account scoring and ranking into the picture. So account scoring, what we mean for the sake of today's exercise, is ranking customers by a goal of your choosing. And that's important. And Tap and I will talk about that. So you could rank all your customers based on who you most want to play golf with. But for the most part, for account scoring, we're focused on who is most likely to buy your products and services. And you certainly can factor in objective and subjective data into these scoring mechanisms. And this is where it starts to get pretty complex, because you can build a lot of math into what these scores look like. And there's a lot of power to that, but there's also a lot of, weighing pros and cons and making sure you get it right. And that's what Taft and I are really going to focus on today. So here are some common metrics, but we're going to dive more into those in a few minutes when we get to the exercise. So bottom line, by combining the objective and subjective approaches of segmentation and scoring, you really can start to develop a very meaningful list of customers to really help build out the rest of your sales strategy and assign them all to your territories and quotas and everything else. So, okay, knowing that is kind of our backdrop is what we mean when we're talking about account scoring, let's get into the actual workshop. And thanks to all of you for the poll up front. And we decided that we're going to pop out of presentation mode for just a second. We're going to be accompanied together for the sake of this workshop in the high tech space. We're going to be ABC software. real original, or maybe we're going to go with Taft software. Taft is starting a new software company today. Well, we're not new, because we've got some fair number of employees. Let's, again, for the sake of exercise, we've already brought on 500 to 1,000 employees, so we're a good size growing company in the tech space. We've got annual revenues around 300 million. And here's some just basic high level objectives, Taft, that let's pretend that we're focused on. So we want to grow our revenue by about 20%. Maybe we want to go into a new market and take Taft software into downstream to the SMB market, small business market, and maybe launch some new product lines this year to really appeal to that market. So as that kind of is our backdrop of who we are as an organization, let's start to think through how we should start evaluating all of the customers that we can focus on in the market. So as Taft and I were talking through his experiences and my experiences and how lots of organizations approach account scoring, there really is a pretty straightforward framework that can really set you on the right path. So number one, starting with your company goals. What are you trying to achieve as an organization? This applies to your entire go-to-market strategy, and that includes getting your account scoring and segmentation right. So knowing out of the gate, what are your big goals as a company is where everyone should be starting on with this effort. Then you start to get into the actual evaluation of the metrics and measures you want to look at across your customers and accounts. And that will be the focus of what Taft and I dive into next. One quick note on this front, and I know it's probably going to make lots of stomachs churn, but data quality. Data quality matters when it comes to the accuracy of your account scoring. So the better data quality, the better and more accurate your scores will be. But there's also some advent of some technology that we'll dive into too that can help with that. The weighting, this is really the art and science. So yes, choosing your metrics is important, but weighing them and figuring out how to balance all of the variables that come into your kind of total score for your customers is very important as well. And it's also where that complexity starts to layer in. So we'll talk a little bit about some best practices for weighing, and then the predictive capabilities that are now pretty readily available. Taft has some great stories that he's going to share on this front. But being able to build in some machine learning to pull in data that, again, kind of the way I said it earlier, that you don't know about your customers, but it's out there and you can get it and really start to get a more holistic picture of your customers' ability to buy from you. So exciting developments on the tech side of things when it comes to evaluating accounts. So Taft, anything else you'd like to add
Yeah.
as we kind of dive into this?
Yeah, I think you've already touched on this, but I think it's worth doubling down on here. On the far left, guys, you see the goals column. I think it's really, really important to stress the value of setting the right goals and specific goals for account scoring. What I don't want people to do is to leave here, go to their operations team and say, I just went to this awesome webinar. Now it's time to do account scoring. Because a good operations team is going to say, great, what are we scoring? And the answer cannot be accounts. It needs to be specifically, very narrowly, what are we modeling for? So in the example of Taft software, I'm an egomaniac. I name everything after myself. In the specific example of Taft software, a good operations team is going to say, great, you want to move down market to capture SMBs. What are we modeling for? And the answer can't be SMBs. It must be who is most likely to buy regardless of revenue, or who is most likely to spend a lot of money with us within SMB, who is most likely to expand. And if you have quality data, and a company of 500 plus people likely has lots and lots of data for a good AI, ML, machine learning product to use to help surface some insights. But the more specific you are, the more likely you're going to get a great score out. Conversely, people who do account scoring because you're supposed to do account scoring and it's a thing businesses do and aren't sufficiently specific. Remember, focus is choosing what not to focus on. If you're not sufficiently specific, you're not going to walk away with an exercise that's super valuable. So that's something to keep in mind. And there are great products out there that can even help you decide which questions you should be asking. And it's the world of tech is really exciting, but you got to start with a very narrow goal.
Great advice, Taft. Absolutely. And we all know the sales cycles that have drawn on too long, and you're chasing the wrong customers, and how painful that is and how expensive that is. So truly, the better you get at your scoring, the more you can really help your sellers stay focused and really bring in the revenue that you need to as an organization. But great advice, Taft.
Sarah and Taft, would you mind? We've got a quick question in chat that I thought was good. They just wanted to know if there's any tips on annual revenue for a company. Should they focus on the annual revenue that company, like the ARR that company can produce for them, or the annual revenue of the company?
Yeah, you want me to take this one, Sarah?
Yeah, it's perfectly on topic as we dive into this. So let's do it.
So, Daniel, what feels like a simple question on the surface actually goes deep. So I'm going to try to keep this short. But to start with, generally, when it comes to account scoring, if it's an attribute, it's usually their revenue. How much money do they bring in? Not, but how much revenue are they likely to spend with you is a question you may score accounts against. Like which account is likely to spend the most money with us. And so that's what revenue means in this context. Like how much do they earn per year? Now, finding annual revenue, there are a lot of different answers to this. And what you have to start with is which companies are we scoring? If you're talking about public companies, it might be as simple as looking at their public facing documentation, their K1s, their Q1s. It's pretty easy to look and say like, oh, their revenue was, $4.8 billion last year. The smaller the company, and once you get into non-public companies, the fidelity of the data goes down a bit, but there are sources you can go. If you're working in tech, you might go to a Crunchbase. If you're going more wide, you might look at a Clearbit, a DiscoverOrg, a ZoomInfo, and one of the literally hundreds of competitors to these guys out there who surface revenue data from lots of different sources, public and otherwise.
Thank you, Taft. And that question was, Marcella, thanks for popping it in, because this is exactly the kind of pros and cons we're going to weigh with a lot of these metrics. So being Taft software, we're going to talk through, these are a collection of account scoring metrics that we commonly see. But you all, as we're talking through this, similar to the revenue question, pop in some metrics and attributes that you use to measure today or you're debating about, and we're happy to fold those into this conversation for sure as we go through this. So we're going to walk through this as an example, and Taft and I are just going to do exactly what he just did with revenue and just weigh, how to think about some of these attributes in the context of scoring. And there's no one single right answer. There's so much that matters about what's going on with your business, and to Taft's point about the goals you're trying to really measure towards, and what's going on with your customer. So lots to kind of dig into here. But if you have additional metrics that you all want to talk through, let's pop them in the chat and we'll try to get through those as well. Okay, so starting with trying to take this larger list and distill it down to metrics that we think are most meaningful for Taft enterprises and Taft software. Let's start with region. And Taft, what do we think about this as a scoring metric as we look at accounts?
Yeah, this is an interesting one because even the word region can have different definitions depending on
Sure.
how wide and geographical area, the size of the area into which you sell. But in most cases, region is important either because of your territory model or because of laws in various other countries or other regions. You may be Smart Recruiters early on. There were parts of EMEA, Europe, Middle East, and Africa as a region where we couldn't sell because we didn't have certain certifications that were required by, for example, the German government. And so region was hugely important for our account scoring. We literally can't score to them. So chances are your company will care about region enough to include it in scoring. But if you're a small startup just selling, you might be a food delivery service only selling to San Francisco, in which case,
Sure.
It doesn't matter. So, is it important is like asking how long is a piece of string. It depends on your situation.
Totally fair. And if anyone has more questions related to these, again, put them in the chat or the Q&A, and we'll come back to them as we keep going through the list. Okay, this is a fun one too. Vertical or industry?
Once again, for some companies, this might be a totally moot point. If you sell a product that is narrowly sold to a sub industry of manufacturing, it might be the case that it's a binary. If they're not in this sub industry, you never talk to them and it doesn't even need to be in scoring. But for most of the folks here who are in tech, they're probably selling to a wider market. If you're Dropbox, oh my gosh, we are a vertically marketed but horizontal product. So industry and vertical is hugely important to us. If you're in media, you automatically get a higher score than someone in legal who may have their own storage system for documents and their own collaboration suite for documents. So for most companies, I think this is going to be like near the top of the list. But once again, it depends on who you are as a company. For us, for Taft Software, definitely important.
Right. And for many organizations, and we're talking through even just like metrics to include, but Taft, you kind of mentioned it, the weighting too. Often industry will come into play specifically on the weighting, because there's a lot of good historical data too that you're going to have on some of these metrics. So historically which industries have purchased from you well in the past, but of course, where are you trying to go? And back to those goals, if you're trying to break into a new industry or selling a new product that might not relate to certain things, all of that's going to matter when it comes to the actual weighting. So yeah, but for Taft Software, we're keeping it in the mix. Okay, number of employees. We're going to scratch this one. We had a good conversation about this one, Taft.
Yeah, I scratched it because we're selling down market. The certain data points, including number of employees. There are a couple of things about this one. First, if you're selling into high tech, this is probably a pretty easy one to get because most tech employees have LinkedIn profiles. LinkedIn is a pretty good place to see how many employees work at a company. you might not even have to buy that data. If you sell to mining and manufacturing companies, an industry without a lot of like tech-enabled workers, you might not have a great data source for number of employees without at least spending some money. And the smaller the company, the lower the fidelity of this data. If we're selling into SMBs, you know, these companies' employee counts could swing by 10, 20, 30% per quarter. And so for me at Taft Software, this is one I want to strike. It's not that important to us as long as we know they meet our sort of threshold of being SMB, whatever we decide that is.
Fair. Okay, I had a couple of thoughts, but I want to keep cruising too, because I know we've got a full list here. And I want to give folks the opportunity to add some things in the chat too. Revenue, let's kind of scoot on past that because we already talked about that, thanks to Daniel's question. But number of product lines, let's think through this one.
Yeah, so this one is interesting. I think there are two ways you could there are two ways to think about this. One is, and this is one I've never used personally, but I sort of liked it as a data point. Is it could be number of product lines they're buying from us, which if they're already a customer, that tells us that we're modeling for their potential to expand. Or maybe, I don't know, it could mean like how many different product lines do they sell, depending on what software you're selling. A company that sells a bunch of different product lines might have a higher score than others. So this one I left in just because it was kind of interesting, and this felt like like it's likely to be very important to a narrow subset of the audience, but a good example of one that's just interesting and could be unique to your company.
Absolutely. And yeah, to me, this is one that often comes up, just as you said, if they have multiple product lines for cross-sell and upsell opportunities. If we, as Taft Software, have multiple software to sell. So this is certainly something that is of interest, especially when you get into trying to sell multiple products or services into a given account. Something that we'll also get into in one of the best practices as we kind of wrap, and not really a focus of today, but in addition to scoring your accounts, you can also do seller scoring as well, and rank and evaluate your sellers with their strengths. And if you've got sellers that are focused on cross-selling and upselling, or have a particular strength with selling into a specific type of product line, similar to industry as well, you can really do some great matchmaking by doing account scoring well and evaluating the skills of your sellers and doing some matchmaking based on a very data-driven approach. So wanted to mention that as well. Okay, D&B or similar sources for collecting that kind of third-party data about your customers.
Yeah, this one's interesting. I think I marked this one out, but this one, the one I've used is ZoomInfo. They count their sources as well, like how they also date their sources, which is an interesting another element that you might care about. But this is one where an ML tool is probably gonna lean on this as a potentially important source. Like, it's a proxy for the fidelity of the data. How trustworthy is this data? How many sources were used to gather the picture that, in this case, Dun & Bradstreet, or, you know, in other cases, ZoomInfo or Clearbit, how many sources did they pull from to put together this picture? So it's one I marked out, but it is potentially an interesting one, especially if you're using an ML tool that needs high quality data in order to do a trustworthy score. Then this could be really important.
Right. Yep. That was what I was thinking as well, that if you need to get that volume of data to really start to feed into a more predictive approach to some of your scoring methods, certainly these third-party data sources can really enrich that and provide you. And if you're also struggling with your own data, I mean, that's probably the number one reason why we subscribe to these sources, is to get better data than you have internally. So certainly, depending on the context of your situation, could be relevant, but we're going to scratch it for TAF software and move on. Okay, products and services used.
This is another one that's interesting, and this could I assume this could be this could either be which of our products and services are already being used by this company if it's an account scoring for like account management, or it could be using a source like BuiltWith to understand, like based on public endpoints that we can access, what products and services are they using independent of us. Are they a Salesforce customer? Are they a Marketo customer? Are they a Smart Recruiters customer? All of these tools have public endpoints that that we can scrape and build a more holistic picture of this business without ever having talked to them. So this is another one I find super interesting. Like who are they already buying from, and are any of those purchases indicative of or do they mean a higher likelihood to buy from us based on historical data?
Absolutely. And I know, speaking specifically to kind of high tech, this is certainly and not unique to that industry at all, but something that we often key in on is what are the other products and services that the organization is using, and how does that give us a better sense of how likely they are to buy our products. Absolutely. All right, competitor data.
Yeah, this one is also interesting. This is I've got a story to tell here at Smart Recruiters. Their competitors became a really important piece of data for us, because one of our outbound campaigns was scoring their application experience. We literally applied to jobs at companies, and we would create an applicant scorecard and say, hey, Pepsi, we applied to some of your jobs. Here is an objective score of how easy or difficult that was. If you're struggling to get candidates, this scorecard might help you understand why. And we figured out that one of the really important data points for deciding who to prospect into next was who their competitors are, and do we have any competitors that are our customers that we can reference. And so our account scoring for likelihood to buy from us was significantly impacted by who their competitors were and if we had experience working with them already. So that was a sort of a very narrow example, but one where competitor data was hugely important to our account scoring.
Absolutely. And great example, and something that if you can get it and you know it's reliable, this can be very good insight for who you need to be focusing on. And especially if you are in a very competitive market, which many times across the tech landscape, we certainly are. So the more you know about your competitors' customers, and the more you can use that information, absolutely relevant in the context of this exercise. But okay, moving right along here, existing relationships.
So this is another one. To some extent, some of these so the context here is we narrowed it down. So some of these I sort of marked out because I had to pick some to mark out. They're all interesting in their own right. So existing relationships was one. This was sort of this was interesting because it could mean existing relationships could have several different meanings, but if it's existing relationships with us as a company, I marked it out because I thought of that as more of an enterprise, as an enterprise metric. If you're selling into SMB, having an existing relationship with the company may make you just as likely to get the deal. That deal in the SMB represents way less money than an existing relationship if you're selling into Fortune 500 is worth. So I marked this one out because I think it will have the less effect on like how much money you make in total. It's also one that's really hard to map. You got to have some really killer data and good roll-ups in your CRM to actually map these relationships in a meaningful way, and requires manual input of data, which as a sales leader and a former sales rep, I know firsthand anything that is manually collected is suspect.
All fair and all great points. It's all relative to the context. So for the sake of exercise and who we are taking on this role, couldn't agree more. It's something that certainly applies to certain circumstances, and even for folks that are into more transactional sales as well, this isn't going to be super relevant for them either. Okay, purchase history. I think this one's probably pretty straightforward.
It is pretty straightforward, and it DocSend and Dropbox even more important as we've been adding products to our portfolio and trying to cross sell and upsell, having an understanding of what they bought in the past and using that as a proxy for what they care about. Hugely important for us and a lot of companies out there. And as it turns out, TAF Software cares a lot about this too.
We sure do. And the only other thing that I would add is this got a little bit tricky to rely on. No one likes to go back to the dark, deep days of the pandemic, the early days of the pandemic, but with buyer circumstances continuing to be in flux in many industries, this is an element that became a little bit less reliable, certainly a couple years ago, but continues to evolve. So while yes, we all love taking a good look at our historical data, it's just something to recognize that it's not in a very volatile environment, which we kind of continue to find ourselves in across most industries. You often need to supplement, and that's why adding more metrics to the picture is important, because this is one that certainly has kind of shifted as far as how we look at it in recent years. All right, channels.
And this is one I'm actually curious. I didn't ask you this before, Sarah, but do you know, how does Varicent define channel in this context? Because I said yes based on my definition, but how do you guys think about this?
Well, let's define it in the way we as TAF Software are thinking about it. But from my perspective, it would be the channels that our customers use to sell. Is that
Awesome.
how you looked at it?
It isn't, so I'm glad I asked.
Okay.
But this is super interesting, and once again, very important to TAF Software. Even though I just learned the definition, it's very important to us. Yeah, the channels they used to sell is huge, and a good if you're Stripe, this might be really high on your list of attributes. And if you're manufacturing and you're way upstream of the eventual sale, you might not care about it at all. How they sell the product doesn't matter. If you're, there's a startup called Instrumental that like helps companies leverage AI on the like floor of these big industrial spaces. Like they don't care how the people eventually sell the thing that they're helping to build. So another example of like, you got to look at the context of your business versus, one size fits all, grabbing these attributes and using ones that work for other people.
Absolutely. And to that point, and I'm just doing a quick time check here. We have about 15 minutes. I think I'm going to switch gears for TAF Software a little bit. Hopefully everyone who is tuned in has got a sense of kind of how we've been talking through things, how nuanced all of this is, and how just certainly applying a methodology to figuring out which metrics matter, and then figuring out how to really build your weighting on top of the metrics that you choose. There's a lot that goes into this. And this is where, as we've kind of said, it can all get pretty complex and unwieldy. So you really want to start with the goals and objectives of your organization and really pull out the metrics. If you already have a pretty complex scoring of your accounts, always go back and reevaluate it. Do those metrics really matter in driving and helping you understand the behaviors of your customers? And if not, maybe it's time for them to be retired. So the scores are a little bit easier to understand, because the way I like the way you said it earlier, Taff, there's a way to do this and to really have impact with your scoring. And then there's a way to do scoring for the sake of scoring. And if your sellers don't trust the guidance of your account scoring, it's not going to be leveraged, and it's a whole lot of work for not a lot of impact. So I've been trying to monitor the chat, and if there's more metrics that folks want to talk through, we certainly can. But I just want to move on a little bit here and round out the conversation about kind of identifying the metrics that work best for you. I'm going to pull Taft out of our make-believe Taft software for a minute and have him talk a little bit more about an example that he shared from DocSend and how they really honed in on this list that we see here to help with their account scoring.
Yeah, and so guys, I'm not gonna like go through these and talk about each one. I think we've done enough of that to get like
Yeah.
an example of how to think about these. But let me give you the context to where these came from, the story of why these are on the screen. So when I joined DocSend, we were doing we were not super efficient in terms of who we followed up with. There was huge opportunity cost because we talked to everyone, and DocSend was a true product-led growth company. Lots of inbound, lots of self-serve, and the sales team really just needed to find the people who were most likely to need help from sales and unlikely to buy without human intervention. Otherwise, we're just cannibalizing self-serve, which is not what we wanted to do as a sales team. And so we engaged a company called Mad Kudu. If you guys don't know these folks, especially if you're looking for lead scoring, top of funnel help, like my favorite vendor in this space. But they also helped us with sort of with account scoring because they scored several different things for us. And so we built a model and said, of the accounts in our system, and this model was run, Daniel, it's Mad Kudu, MADKUDU. The company helped us sort of look at all of our data back years, I think 6 years at the time, and said, we're going to model who is the most likely to buy from you and spend at least $1,500 and need to engage with a human. And the big takeaway here is when you use a Mad Kudu, a Varicent, one of 100 others to do ML and AI based evaluation of these attributes, some really interesting things surface. Some things that you never would have expected to be important to your buyers surface. And I cut some that are like secret sauce that are like borderline proprietary to DocSend, but I left in ones that are interesting, but not really in proprietary territory. If the first person who signed up with us, regardless of all the information about the account that comes later, if the first person used a personal email, that's a really bad sign for us all the way through to eventual cross sells, upsells. And if they've raised money is really important to DocSend because we sell to so many startups that have recently raised money. And so I won't go through all of these, but this is one example of like some of the inputs for a model that helped us understand our world a lot better and helped us know how do we become more efficient and how do we only reach out to the accounts that need to talk to us versus the literally hundreds of thousands of others that the sales team should never touch because they're a waste of our time.
Absolutely. And this is all the foundation, right? And this is, you never want to build a home on a rocky, uncertain foundation, right? Getting these attributes and this scoring right to really figure out the accounts you need to be focused on. This is the foundation for everything else you're going to do as a sales operations leader, as a sales leader, as an individual contributor. So it's really exciting that we're able to get better and better at this effort because that just gives us more and more of an opportunity to really take these accounts, put them more intelligently into the way we approach the market. So if we're building territories, getting all of the accounts into territories in a way that makes the most sense, making sure that the quotas that ultimately get out to the sellers, again, are stretch goals, but are achievable because your sellers are going to be able to focus on these accounts. And to Taft your point, there might be things about these accounts that you had never really thought about before, but are key and helping identify who is really ready and willing to buy from you. So to that point, I'm going to move ahead a little bit, just doing another quick time check, to talking a little bit more about adding that intelligence layer to your account scoring. I just want to have this for everyone to take and kind of keep in the back of your minds, regardless of where you are in your account scoring journey, because there is some really, really great things that, whether you want to talk to Varicent or you're exploring how to bring in some more predictive and kind of machine learning approaches to this, it's far more accessible and approachable than it ever has before or been before. But what does that really mean? So just to break this down so everyone kind of can level set on what we're talking through here, if we think back to account segmentation and what we talked about up front, that is really what I like to consider everything you know about your customers. You can very easily bucket that information and get access to that, and it's all very known. Account scoring and what we've been talking through helps you identify the things you don't know, and some of those subjective layers to the data, and some things that are more of a subjective measure but matter to your business. And you can build that in and weigh and score that in a way that's going to help you figure out those customers with high propensity. Then there's the unknowns. And these are the things that you don't know about your customer. I'll say it one more time. They're the things you don't know about your customer. And what's exciting about where technology is today is that can be uncovered very quickly and very meaningfully for you to really round out what you know about your customers. And that doesn't mean that what you know about your customer and the subjective elements that your sales team has from building all of those great relationships, it doesn't mean that none of that doesn't matter. All of that is hugely important and still very, very relevant, but it's not the full picture. There might be things going on within your customer's organization that they have not shared with you, but it's still able to be pulled in from kind of a machine learning or AI driven source, and being able to pair that with what you are already collecting about your customer, again, just enriches the insights you have and allows you as a sales organization to build more effective plans and keep your sellers focused on folks that they need to be focused on, even as we said, with how fast things have been evolving in this kind of volatile environment we're still in, they can still stay focused. And even when things change with your customer circumstances, they can catch on to that faster by being able to kind of supplement that added layer of predictive intelligence. And Taff, keep me honest, is that all fair to say from your perspective?
Yeah, I think it is, and I want to double down on how interesting and valuable the unknowns can be. And the more data you have, the more historical data you have, the more irresponsible it is to not find those out right now. As you have a lot of data to lean on, there are. I'm not a tools first guy. I'm a process first guy, a problems first guy. But if you have lots of data and you haven't done thoughtful account scoring yet, and you have a sales team spending lots of time doing prospecting, selling, like that's the one you got to uncover, and you need to help to do it. And it was transformative for DocSend and will continue to be for companies that leverage these technologies.
Well said. Yep. And I know at Varicent, one of the things we really try to do for our customers in this context is make sure that they've got access to all of this. So it isn't about just one score. We will compare that predictive score and if you have an existing methodology to your scoring, we can compare multiple scores. And again, just present your sellers with more information to really make better judgment calls about how they engage. And we also take it to a layer of providing not just the score, but how we got there. And I think for anyone building these scoring methodologies, that's also important for your sellers. If you can share that in a way that they can consume, it just helps build trust in knowing that, okay, these scores came from somewhere. And if I need to dig in and understand where they came from, I can. And again, just build that trust that, okay, this is where I need to spend my time. And if I do this, I'm going to be successful. Okay, so T-minus 5 minutes. Marcella, I know we want to save a couple minutes for Q&A, and we've taken a couple questions, but folks can feel free to pop those in the chat as we kind of wrap things up. Just a couple best practice things that I wanted to make sure we left you all with. Some of these things we were able to get to today, but some of them we were not. So Taft, I'll just run through these real quick and would love your thoughts too. But of course, segmenting and scoring helps you better understand your customer's ability to buy. Defining scoring mechanisms to simplify things, but the weighting is where you can get to really that kind of multidimensional view of what that score needs to be, and that we could have done a whole separate session on digging into the weighting. Leveraging seller profile metrics. We mentioned this briefly. So being able to measure your sellers as well as your accounts, that again is where you can really do some powerful matchmaking. Scoring thresholds, again, another best practice approach to building out your scores. Piloting initial assumptions. I kind of skipped a slide on this, but like anything you do for your sales organization, pilot it, make sure the scoring is something that is going to work for your sellers, get buy-in, get support, and kind of standard change management best practices there. And then leveraging predictive intelligence, we talked on that as well. But Taft, I'll turn to you for kind of closing advice and thoughts as we wrap up here.
Yeah, I think a few thoughts here. Sarah, this is something you already said, but it bears repeating. This is not a problem with a simple answer. Scoring is sufficiently complex that there is no one size fits all answer. So remember how we thought about all of these attributes. Don't try to remember the attributes. Don't come back to this deck for the purpose of copying the attributes and building your own model or looking at the ones I highlighted. What I want you guys to sort of absorb is the framework, as Sarah said earlier. And I'm guessing because there's so many tech companies here, there are probably a lot of early stage companies here. Start simply. You don't have to on day one go buy an ML product to have a score that will work for you. But always keep your eye toward when do we have enough data that we think we need some help interpreting it. How much data you need for that is sort of up to you. But I think you'll find as you get to a place where it makes sense to leverage technology to understand better, what are the connections between attributes and likelihood to do X, buy, expand, cross sell, whatever. This is where it becomes really fun to sort of tease out these insights. But yeah, early on, keep it simple and have fun sort of digging into the data and learning things that may not be so obvious from an individual's point of view, without sort of digging deeply into all the data your CRM and your other systems can bring to bear on the problem of scoring.
I love your passion, Taft. Have fun with it. And absolutely, but look at what you can do. Just that this is our last slide, but the impact you can have by having some fun along the way and really honing your account scoring efforts, you're going to better meet your customers' needs. You're going to win more often, win bigger, all the things we love to do. We didn't talk much about this, but it's a really good point to make that if you can get buy-in across your revenue teams on your scoring methodology, so marketing's using the same, sales, operations, again, you're just going to streamline efficiencies there and really make sure that you're all firing on all cylinders and focused on the right accounts across those go-to-market efforts. And then more efficiencies, you're driving profitability. You're doing things in a way that is more effective for your organization. So big impact here by just taking the time to really dig into your account scoring practices and figure out where and how you can improve. But Taft, this has been such a pleasure. Glad we were able to join the sales hacker community today.
Yeah, likewise. Thanks for having me, guys.
Taft and Sarah, I want to thank you guys so much for this information. You give me hope that lead scoring models don't have to be getting locked in a room in a bunch of slap fights. I think it could be a really fun exercise. So you're giving me hope, but thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and experience with us today. I appreciate all the attendees for coming. I encourage you next Thursday to join us for Nerf guns and rack of ribs, customer gifts that cut through the noise. And then following that, we're going to talk about, we're going to have leaders who are in the trenches in the 2008 recession and talk about what we've learned during that time. So I encourage you to join us, join the Sales Hacker community and continue the conversation there. And don't forget the Women in Sales Summit. Thanks so much for joining, and we'll see you guys next time.
Thanks, Marcella. Thanks, Taft. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.